Smoke lifted off the town like a black prayer, the kind whispered by men who didn't believe in anything. Mara Lark ran through it with a stitch in her side and the taste of ash in her mouth, dress torn at the hem, a leather satchel thumping against her ribs. Bells clanged somewhere. Maybe the church, maybe a cowbell swinging from a burned porch. Her breath came high and fast, rasping. Boots crunched behind her. Laughter too. Men's laughter, humorless and clean as a knife. A rope creaked from a gallows that had never been there yesterday. Now it swung idle from the charred crossbeam of the assay office, hatless silhouettes watching it sway, as though it were a weather vane. One of the silhouettes lifted a rifle to the ruin-red sky. "Run, little bird," a voice called. "Fly, if you like. We burn the branches." The rifle barked. A window burst into confetti of glass beside her ear. Mara stumbled down the ridge road, into the pale grass and the open badlands beyond, clutching the satchel to her stomach as though it were the only organ that mattered. The satchel held a ledger, stiff and square, the pages pressed flat by a brass clasp. It's what they had come for. It's what they'd torched half the town to find. The men who wanted it were called the Slate Boys, after their boss, Vernon Slate, who liked to slide a smooth grey stone across his knuckles as he talked. He'd caged a silver tooth behind a preacher's smile and wore a black frock coat too fine for dust country. He'd promised that ledger back like a man promising rain. He'd promised that if he didn't get it, he'd salt the earth and hang the scarecrows with living throats. Mara's braid, ash blonde and matted with soot, slapped her shoulder as she pounded along a game trail. Windmilled ravens rose in a gust. Ahead, a split-rail fence, sun-silvered and low. Beyond it, a ranch house hunched against a stand of cottonwoods, their leaves whispering. She threw herself over the rails, fell into a dry yard where a windmill creaked, old iron singing to itself, and the smell of coffee drifted from an open window. Boots crunched again, closer now, like teeth chewing gravel. A shadow stretched long across the fence. How long can a secret buy you life in a country that eats secrets for breakfast? And what, exactly, did she carry that was worth a town turned to coals? She rose, shaking, and the screen door swung wide. Vernon Slate had a talent for making men feel smaller than their boots. He rode with six, some called them the 6 talons, each a different breed of hunger. He dismounted at the ruins with deliberate grace, dusting his coat sleeves with a white kid glove, and looking left then right, as if examining a stage that a lazy crew had half struck. The coin of his silver tooth flashed when he smiled. The stone rolled over his knuckles, smooth as the lies that had built his fortune. "Think on this, gentlemen," he said, walking past the gallows. "A ledger is a kind of holy book, and our names are written in it. If scripture escapes, the congregation grows angry." He stopped at the church steps where a basket of apples had spilled and baked glossy in the heat. "I do not like angry congregations." One of his men, Bale, a bull-necked creature with a lopsided mustache, dragged a coughing storekeep from the rubble. The old man's spectacles were scabbed with soot. Slate knelt and held up one lens to the light, as if squinting through a monocle. "You saw a girl run," he said gently. "Pretty with a freckle by the left eye. Green dress, now grey." The storekeep shook, lips blistered. "No." Slate sighed and patted his cheek with the soft glove, leaving a print on the ash. "Pain is the language God uses when we fail to learn by kindness." He nodded to Bale. The big man wrenched the storekeep's hand flat on the step. The knife was quick. A scream shivered the smoke. "Direction," Slate said, wiping the blade on a hymnal. "Point." The old man pointed, sobbing toward the ridge road and the open range. Slate stood. He flicked the stone into the air and caught it again, the rock ticking across his knuckles like a cool clock. "She runs to someone," he mused. "People always do at the end. They run to a gate with light. Find the gate. Bring the light down." Mara, meanwhile, crouched behind the ranch house water barrel, fighting to be small. Her palms shook. The satchel seemed to hum against her, the brass clasp hot from her body heat. In her head she heard her father's voice, soft-spoken, ink-stained. "Copy it all, Mara, keep it safe. If they take it, men will die. If you show it, men may live." Her father, the railroad clerk who'd counted kickbacks and blood money until counting, got him killed. She swallowed hard. The screen door behind her creaked open, and a shadow fell across the dirt like a hat brim sliding over the sun. "Girl," a voice said, rough as a file. "Hands where I can see them." Mara lifted her hands, pushing the satchel forward with her wrist. She turned, heart hammering toward her throat. A man stood in the door, older, maybe 50, sun-carved, with a salt and pepper beard trimmed close and a scar that hooked his jaw like a fish had been there once. Battered Stetson, long duster the color of tobacco. One blue eye squinted, the other narrowed by habit. A colt rode his hip like it had learned his stride. His boots were cracked and oiled and ready for miles. "Name's Caleb Rourke," he said. "This is my place." Rope creaked from the windmill like a noose learning a song. Hoofbeats faint crested the ridge. Caleb tilted his head, listening. "You bring that fire with you, miss?" Mara tried to answer. The first rifle shot took a bite out of the fence post. The second snapped the bucket's handle beside her cheek. She choked on dust, and Caleb Rourke stepped into the yard. Caleb didn't look like a savior. He looked like a man who'd learned to lose with grace. Once a lawman, if the straightness of his spine said true, now a rancher because he didn't know how to quit the land. Lines scored the corners of his mouth. A faded kerchief hung at his throat, sun-bleached to a sad rose. The colt on his hip wasn't polished. It was used. "Inside," he told Mara, voice low. "Floor by the stove. Keep your belly to the wood." She hesitated. He gently but firmly gripped her elbow and aimed her toward the kitchen. She caught a whiff of coffee and saddle soap as she passed him. Clean, bitter things that made the world feel briefly less crooked. The house was spare. Iron hooks by the door, a Bible open on a nail-bent shelf, a photograph turned face down beside it. On the table lay a whetstone clouded with pale steel dust, and a long Spencer rifle older than both of them. "Rancher," a voice outside called sing-song. "We're looking for a stray dove. You seen her?" Caleb took the Spencer from the table and checked the block with a pivot of his wrist. The motion practiced, patient. "You talk to me," he called back, stepping into the doorway, the barrel low. "Don't shout at my walls." Laughter fanned across the yard. 3 figures rode up to the fence. Scouts, not the whole swarm. Bale was among them, mustached like a bent nail, eyes yellow as old stew. Another wore a gambler's vest, his hands too soft for his gun. The third boy was too young and already mean, the kind of mean that grows like mold if no one scrapes it off. "Boss says bring the girl," Bale said. "Boss says burn what won't bend." Caleb leaned one shoulder into the doorframe, weight on his bad leg. There was a stiffness there, a remembered bullet wound made into weather predictor. "Boss can come ask me himself." Boots crunched. Spurs hissed. Her hand lowered the galling latch on a carbine. Caleb lifted the rifle in a smooth, almost apologetic motion. The first shot took the gambler's hat off, and with it the part of his ear that listened to mercy. The man toppled backward off his horse, screaming, clutching red. The second shot hit the young one in the shoulder, spinning him like a weathercock. The third cracked Bale's rifle stock, splintering it to kindling. Bale swore and slid behind the fence post. "You're old, rancher," he panted. "You think you stand against Vernon Slate's money?" Caleb worked the lever by feel. "I stand against men who set fire to homes. I've stood against worse with less." Mara watched from the floor, palms sweating into the boards, cheek lined with dust. She could see the heel of Caleb's boot planted, the leather wrinkled under pressure, the toe lifting as he shifted weight. Outside, a rider whooped, a signal carrying down the ridge. "More coming," Mara whispered, throat tight. Caleb glanced back once. His eyes weren't young, but they were steady. "Then we keep them from getting inside." He jerked his chin at the satchel clutched to her chest. "Whatever that is, it better be worth the fight." "It is," she swallowed. "It's what they're willing to kill a town to bury." Caleb's jaw worked. Somewhere behind the wind and the smoke he heard another sound. A stone clicking over knuckles, invisible and smug. "Then we don't let them bury it," he said, stepping out onto the porch as hooves thundered closer, the yard shrinking to the size of a man's choices. They came the way locusts come, sudden, noisy, dumb with appetite. 6 riders fanned across the yard, dust pluming at their hocks. Vernon Slate at their black center as if the sun had decided to dress in a frock coat. He smiled up at the porch, gloved hand resting on his saddle horn like a man pausing before an address. The windmill turned and creaked. A lonely, blind-sounding song. "Mr. Rourke," Slate called, voice honey-thick, "you've taken in a trespasser." "Taken in a traveler," Caleb answered. "Common law out here?" Common, Slate echoed with distaste, the stone ticking over his knuckles. I need a book she borrowed. Nothing but figures. Worthless weight to a rancher. Worth a great deal to men of enterprise. Step aside. Caleb's gaze slid to Mara, crouched behind the half-shutter of the window. He saw her eyes, green and hard with fear, the freckle by the left eye, the thin blood at her temple. He saw the ledger's square shape under the satchel leather. He saw the kind of thing a man spends his last bullet on, because later he wants to live with himself. No, he said simply. Slate sighed as though turned down for a dance. Bail, he said mildly. Educate him. Bale and another rushed the porch. Caleb shot the first in the thigh and clubbed the second with the Spencer's stock, wood-thocking bone. A third leaped the fence and fired from the saddle. The bullet split the porch pillar into a shabby bouquet. Splinters stung Caleb's cheek, and blood made a pink tear on his beard. Mara scrambled to the stove and found by grace or design a small shotgun hung on a nail inside the wood-box door. She broke it open, 2 shells waiting like words on a secret note. She snapped it shut and crawled to the corner, breath thin. Now, Slate cooed, gun unholstered at last, silver tooth flashing. Let's not... Caleb's next shot punched Slate's hat into the dust. The gang boss smiled wider as if delighted. Ruin my hat, I shoot your house, he said, and fired. The bullet smashed the kitchen lamp. Kerosene leaped bright. Flames licked up the curtain and tasted the ceiling. The windmill rope creaked like it pitied them. Smoke bellowed sudden and mean. Out! Caleb barked to Mara, but when he turned, a 4th man was already on the porch, revolver braced with both hands. The crack was close and ugly. Caleb staggered, breath slammed out of him. Heat under his ribs, wet. Mara shrieked without sound. The porch tilted. Caleb went to one knee, teeth clenched. He shot the porchman off his feet purely by muscle memory, the Spencer steady as a pulpit. Then he pushed up, slow, stubborn, and grabbed Mara's shoulder. Back of the house, he rasped. Root cellar. Fire chased them, greedy. They stumbled through a kitchen of breaking glass and thrown sparks, boots crunching on lamp fragments. The back door banged open against the wind. They skidded into the skinny yard where a line of laundry, shirts ghosting in the heat, reached toward the open prairie. Ledger, Caleb said, voice tattered. If I go down, you run for the Blue Butte there. 3 miles. There's a wash below it, cave with a spring. You can hide till night, but don't let him get that book. Mara's throat clicked. You're not going down. Everyone does, he said almost kindly. Question is how. A shout behind them. There! Bale's bootbeats chewed the dust. Mara raised the small shotgun and fired. Bale spun and dropped, shocked more than dead, bone-white in the smoke. Good, Caleb coughed, blood on his lips. Again if you have to. They ran for the corral, horses panicked and blowing. Behind them, Vernon Slate walked through the burning house as if it were a warm bath. Gloved hand up against drifting cinders, stone still flipping like a metronome he'd taught the world to obey. Bring me the book, he sang. Bring me the book or I burn the county. Mara threw the cellar door wide, but smoke belched up from it like the mouth of a furnace. The fire had found the dry grass stacked below. No refuge there. The world squeezed smaller. Caleb swore and shouldered the corral gate. It groaned open. The black gelding danced, whites of his eyes big as oysters. Up, Caleb ordered. Go! She climbed, skirt snarling, satchel thudding, the shotgun a slim stick in her hands. Caleb slapped the horse's rump. It bolted, hooves pistoning. A bullet snapped past Mara's ear and took a piece of her braid. She looked back and saw Caleb plant himself, legs braced, rifle nested in his shoulder, bleeding and unbowed. She saw Slate's riders spread to flank. She saw a narrow path through the mesquite, thin as a promise, and kicked the gelding toward it. Ride. Caleb roared, voice tearing as the windmill's rope sang on, an old gallows in a bright day. Mara rode like every hoofbeat paid down a debt. The Blue Butte swelled ahead, heat mirage fidgeting its edges. Bullets worried the air behind her, little insects with teeth. She crouched low, the satchel yanked tight. The horse's lungs thundered under her thighs, slick with effort, generous. She angled for the wash Caleb had named, praying he'd told the truth like a man who meant to die clean. At the lip of the ravine, she hauled the gelding left and slid down loose rock. The animal scrambled, iron ringing on stone. and she pulled him into the shadow of a tumbled boulder. The wash bent like an elbow. There, a crack in the earth exhaled cool air and the whisper of water. Mara dismounted, staggered into the slit and found a spring, clear as a promise. She swallowed, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and pressed her ear to the light. Voices braided on the wind, Slate's drawl mock kind, Caleb's silence heavy, Bale's breathing wet. She lifted the ledger, feeling its weight as if new. Her father's hand had written tidy columns, dates, names, shipments, bribes paid by men with white collars to men with black hands. A particular line made her skin go cold. A contract for guard labor, signed in Slate's tidy clerk's script, authorizing the depopulation of 3 ranch valleys that had resisted a railroad spur. Cost 6 lives, 2 barns, 4 wells filled with stone. The signature below clean sure belonged to a territorial judge. The world tilted. She saw the town burning again. She saw Caleb on the porch, standing upright on a wound because he'd long ago decided the only thing that matters is which way you face when you fall. Boots crunched above the wash. Slate's voice floated down. You run, you lose. I will buy your miles and sell them back to you as graves. Mara closed the ledger and slid it back into the satchel. She wiped her face, then reached for the shotgun. It felt small. She felt small. But the crack in the rock curved, and a man who knew rock could turn small into unseen. She crept along the seam until she had a sliver view of the wash mouth. Caleb stood there, squared to the riders. Spencer lowered now, the barrel trembling from blood loss. Slate sat his horse 10 yards away, stone dancing, smile gentle as a funeral hand. Men flanked like wolves who'd learned manners. Slate spoke without looking at Caleb, speaking to the air, to God. Girl, he called softly. I have men with pistols. Please, no more deaths for paper. Come out with the book. Caleb lifted his head. Don't, Slate sighed. Bale? Bale, limping, raised his gun and aimed it at Caleb's knee. We'll keep the other leg for questions. Mara stepped out of the crack before she could talk herself out of it. Vernon Slate, she said, voice steady by some miracle she would later call borrowed. You already lost. Eyes turned. Slate's silver tooth flashed. Child, trade the book for your breath. She held the ledger up. It's not just names and sums. It's proof. Judge Barrow's signature. Railroad letters authorizing murders you performed. I send this to the Denver papers. You won't be riding a county again. A governor can be bought. A mob not so easy. Slate's smile thinned. The stone stopped on his knuckles. Then you must die before you post a letter. Mara swallowed. Maybe, but not before I show someone. I showed him. She nodded at Caleb. He was a law once. His word still counts in places the sun can reach. Caleb straightened. Pain made his voice a wire. Vernon Slate, he said. He'll holster your gun, call your wolves off and ride. Or I'll plant you here and water this wash with your blood until mesquite grows mouths. Slate laughed softly. Theatrical. True, Caleb said and raised the Spencer one last time. Slate's eye flicked to the rifle, calculated the tremble, and he drew. It was fast, practiced, but Caleb had anticipated the draw rather than the shot. He fired as the gun cleared leather. The bullet took Slate through the silver tooth and sent him off the saddle with a bloom of red and a spray of polished lye. The stone skipped once and lay still, darkening. Bale yelled and fired wild. Mara braced the little shotgun against the rock and squeezed. Bale's chest cratered. He folded like a tent struck from the inside. The young wolf wheeled his horse and ran, already recurving into a future of small, mean choices far from here. Silence collected, hot, tender, lidless. The windmill at the ranch moaned, far away and thin. Hayfly considered Slate's open mouth and thought better of it. Caleb's legs melted under him. He sat down gently, as if minding a chair that had offended him. Blood made a dark comma at his ribs. Mara ran to him, hands out, not knowing which hurt to touch. Don't you die, she said fiercely. Don't make me carry all this alone. He smiled, dry. I don't aim to. Might change how I keep my cows, though. Less inviting to arson, maybe. She laughed, wild and wet. The laughter turned to a sob. You saved me. He shook his head. You saved yourself. I only gave time a direction. They sat that way while the light drew long angles. When at last the world started moving again, Mara tore the lining from her skirt and pressed it to Caleb's wound, tight as law. She tightened a belt around it and cranked until he cursed her name with fondness. Then she mounted up and helped him onto the gelding, body slumped but stubborn. They rode back to the ranch in two reluctant pieces of the same story. The house smoldered. Half the roof gone, but the well remained. And the windmill kept singing its old rope song. Proof that something can creak and still hold. Mara spent the night copying every page of the ledger in a tight clerk's hand like her father taught her. At dawn, with Caleb asleep and coughing but alive, she saddled the bay mare that had not run, tucked a copy of the ledger beneath her shirt, and rode to the telegraph office in the next town, where the ink still knew right from wrong. She sent pages west and north to papers that chewed corruption like hardtack and spat splinters. She mailed copies to the territorial marshal and to a preacher she trusted more than most sermons. By week's end, men with badges arrived with questions they had saved for years. By month's end, Judge Barrow hurried his affairs toward a train that did not leave and a map that did not forgive. By the first snow, the ghost of Vernon Slate had fewer alleys to haunt. Mara stayed through the healing, feeding calves and grief, learning the roof's grammar, the way wind asked for repair. Caleb taught her fence and coffee, and the law of small mercies. She taught him letters from cities he'd stopped believing in, letters that spelled out something like justice, marching in dusty boots. When spring came, the cottonwoods shook new green. The windmill creaked, but its song had softened. Mara stood at the gate with the ledger's last copy under her arm, and Caleb stood beside her, scar bright in the sun. "Some secrets keep you alive," she said. "Some kill everyone around you if you keep them." He nodded. "Hard part is knowing which is which, and finding a friend before the wrong one burns you." She looked toward the blue butte and the wash where she'd learned the shape of her courage. Then she turned to the road. "I'll take this to Denver myself," she said. "Look the editor in the eye." Caleb adjusted his hat. "You ride careful, Miss Lark." "I will," she said. Then softer, "Come with me?" He considered the ranch, the plank where a porch once was, the sky that had decided not to fall today. "I'll meet you after branding," he said. "A man keeps his word to calves." She smiled. "I'll hold you to it." They shook hands like partners. Boots crunched, ropes creaked. The sun threw coins down the trail and the wind spent them lavishly. And to the folks listening, if you were in Mara's place, green fire on your back, a book that could change the county in your hands, what would you do? Like this story and subscribe for the next Wild West tale. And if you want to see how the next battle unfolds, don't miss the next story. Subscribe now.